So my question is, when it comes to this soul flight theory, uh, can you please explain the theory in more details? Like, is it that a person or a second person would summon an animal spirit or a soul to the human spirit, and they will somehow combine? How would this work?
So that's going to how is going to vary slightly based off your religion. So I'm just going to cycle through really quick several different religions' visions of the soul. The Chinese, you have like 10 souls. You like I'm going to get the number wrong. You have like 7 Poes and 3 Huns or something like that. 4 Poes, some huge figure of souls. The only thing that we need to know here is the bottom is so half of your souls come from heaven, the other half come from earth. It's the earth ones that turn into a werewolf, if you're doing Chinese werewolfism. And as I said, there's not a lot on that, and it's convoluted. In the Norse context, it's just they call it your like the terms used in the ancient Norse are sort of ambiguous. Again, the implication is it's a lower soul, but since the number of souls in the Norse are argued about, it's hard to say. In general, it's either your soul if you think you have one, or your like animal soul if you think you have 2 or more. So in a Greek context, you have 3 souls, right? These are the famous. They show best well known for Aristotle, but he's not inventing them out of a hat. The rational soul, the animal soul, the vegetative soul. It would be the rational soul that you'd want to use here. Ogden talks about how sort of there's a relationship between werewolfism and having a hairy heart in Greek literature. As I said, in more recent shamanic literature is usually collected from cultures that have been heavily Christianized, and individuals tend to believe they have one soul, so they say it's their soul turning into an animal. But in terms of an animal spirit coming down, there's basically nothing, with one possible exception. In the exceptionally fraught area of Nahuatl studies, so the studies of the people that used to be called the Aztecs, that included the Aztecs, I should say, the Nahuatl, there's an activity called Nagualism. And in Nagualism, it is your soul, but your ability to do that is conferred by a special animal spirit that joins you at birth and determines what you can turn into. But as I said, Nagualism is there's an ongoing dispute. One of the issues with Nagualism is we have very, very few records. We do have records from before the Spanish conquest. Like some did survive, but much of it is from after the conquest, especially the religious stuff. And the part of the dispute is contemporary Nahuatl werewolf. I'm going to call them werewolves. Strictly speaking, they turn into like coyotes or butterflies or rabbits or all other animals, but we'll just call them werewolves. Say they're Christian. They say they're Christian. They've held their Christian for centuries. How seriously do we take this claim? Because there's actually 3 ways we can take it, right? We can assume they're lying to avoid persecution by church authorities. We can assume they're correct, they are sincere but deluded. These are all more, say, in line with historic demonology. The third approach is that they are both sincere and have, as best they can, thought this out. So when they say, I'm doing Christian werewolfism, they're not lying and they're not kooky. And in defense of this hypothesis, it's worth noting that in the 15 and 1600s, Catholic inquisitors in Poland, parts of Germany, parts of Hungary, and parts of Italy tripped over a number of groups of individuals who claimed that they turned into animals of one sort or another. In Italy, it was like butterflies and rabbits. In Poland and Germany, it was werewolves. the famous T.S. of Kaltenbrunn, but there are a couple others that show up in the records. They argued with the inquisitors when they were brought in and accused of heresy. They argued, and they brought scripture up in defense, and they were never recanted. Funnily enough, okay, I shouldn't say some of them did recant because they didn't like being tortured, but from the perspective of strict argument, they did not, in fact, recant their position that they were engaging in serious Christian werewolfism. And battling witches, in the case of T.S. of Kaltenbrunn, fighting Satan himself, which is an impressive claim.
So Jordan, before you continue, would it be safe to, well, maybe not give a conclusion, but would it be safe to say that in this context and in this interpretation, werewolfism would work by a person who wanted to change, transform temporarily, would either do some incantation or magical ritual or do a spell, or would maybe hire or ask for help someone else who is able to do that, so that for a temporary time of, doesn't matter, 5-10 hours, really the time doesn't matter, this person would transform into what they're not something naturally, and this will happen by the two souls of animal and the human soul as a host would somehow merge and work, and they, at a certain time when the spell or the ritual would stop working, usually in movies it's like when the moon is, when the night is over, the morning comes, and then this animal soul would depart and human person would come to his own senses. Is this safe to say that when it comes to this interpretation, this is a decent summary of what you've been saying?
Sort of. So there's two aspects. The first is the soul question. Jews believe in multiple souls. You have multiple souls. So when I say your animal soul, I'm not meaning like some weird thing that comes and joins you. It's with you at birth. It's just as much part of you as your higher irrational soul. Not like rectifying it is very important in Jewish religion, not in the sense that everyone has to go out and become a werewolf for obvious reasons. Just go to your local synagogue and test that claim out, but in the sense that our animal soul controls a number of our appetitive faculties and our emotional faculties, and trying to suppress those leads us away from God, because God made that soul just as much as he made the higher soul. That's the Jewish view. Various other religions have not identical but comparable views. In the case of Taoism and the Norsemen and the Greeks, the Jewish view here is very in line with New Eastern views. If you think it's one soul, I suppose you could say it's an animal soul joining. As I said, that's with the possible exception of the Aztec encounters, that's convoluted. In terms of how, there's a few different methods. I'm not going to give the full details on this show because I don't think you want me to. One of them is chemical. Unfortunately, it's recorded in Christian witch hunting manuals. I have the whole thing upstairs. Skeptics argued it worked hallucinogenically. Unfortunately, that claim has been tested and resoundingly, I won't say disproven, but it remains in interminable dispute land, and frankly has more to do with your a priori metaphysical assumptions about the existence of werewolves than anything else. But making a decoction of certain herbs. Others involved. There are certain ritual apparatuses involved in a lot of this. I don't like spells or incantations. It's always hard. Like, what do we call a spell or an incantation? The only surviving methods I've encountered in the Nahuatl material are Christian prayers. He's praying to Jesus. Spell. Maybe it's a spell or incantation, but It is a Christian prayer. In the case of maybe some of the Taoist material, you might recite what we might call a spell, but they would call chants or mudras or sealing, depending on their specific branch or context. In the Greco-Roman case, you basically did it through the Nietzschean power of will. You were like, will macht zur, or will zur macht, I'm doing this. Like the Etruscan werewolves would walk over coals. And try to affect the transformation during that period. Unfortunately, as I said, the Greek rites remain a matter of dispute, and particulars are foreign to us. So as I said, maybe we might say spells. That gets into a much wider context about how do we define spells and incantations. But for the purposes of, I guess, discussion, you're going to say something. Yeah, probably.